46, the $3 trick that makes any metal rust-proof forever. They never taught you. There is a hinge in your life right now that squeaks the same. Note it did last winter. You know the one. Maybe it's the gate to the side yard. Maybe it's the lid of the toolbox your father handed down before he stopped being able to lift it. Run your thumb along the pin. Feel that fine orange dust come off on your skin. That dust cost the American homeowner close to $9 billion a year in replaced tools and ruined equipment. $9 billion. For a reaction a child could draw on a napkin. And for almost 300 years, plain working men knew how to stop it with something that fit in a coat pocket and cost less than a cup of coffee. Then, somewhere between your grandfather's barn and the lighted aisle at the hardware store, that little piece of knowledge went quiet. It didn't die. It got buried. If you're the sort who'd rather fix a thing once than buy it 3 times, sit a minute. Pour something warm. There's a small tribe of us still trading these old plain answers back and forth, and the bell under this video is how the next one finds you. No pressure, no pitch. Just leave a word in the comments before you go. Even one. So the algorithm knows there's another quiet hand on the bench. Tonight, that's all. We'll get back to the rust, walk back out to wherever that hinge lies. Look around it. I'll wager there are 3 other things within 10 feet that have gone the same color. A shovel leaned against the wall with a bloom of orange where the blade meets the handle. A cast iron skillet that somebody, God love them, left wet in the sink one Tuesday, and now it looks like a piece of barn roof. The bolt heads on the wood stove door, the underside of the trailer you keep meaning to sell. Maybe a rifle barrel you haven't pulled out since deer season before last. You don't have to count them. You already know. Here's the part that ought to bother a working man more than it does. Every one of those things was made by somebody who knew, the day it left the factory, exactly how long it would last in your weather. They built it to a number, and the number wasn't your lifetime. It was somewhere shorter, short enough that you'd be back. Now, I'm not telling you that to make you angry. Anger doesn't fix a hinge. I'm telling you because the fix starts with seeing the orange dust for what it actually is. It isn't damage. It's a transaction you didn't agree to. There is, sitting on a shelf in most hardware stores in this country, a small can that costs somewhere between $2 and $4. I'll name it before we're done. What it does to bare iron is not what a rust spray. A rust spray paints over the problem. This thing reaches into the metal, into pores you can't see without a microscope, and bonds. It doesn't sit on top of the steel. It becomes part of the surface. And the reason that matters is the second thing nobody teaches you anymore, which we'll get to in a minute. Now, before I go any further, I owe you a straight word. Nothing on God's green earth makes steel immortal. Not this. Not anything. If a man tells you different, count your wallet on the way out. What I am telling you is that a tool treated the old way, the right way, on a quiet Saturday afternoon will outlast the can it came in. It will outlast the truck you treated it in the bed of. In most cases, it'll outlast the man who applied it, and the next fellow who picks it up will think you bought it new. That's the honest version of forever. That's the only version worth selling. The price, since I know you're a man who watches a price tag, works out like this. One small can, call it $3, is enough material to treat a full set of garden tools, the hinges on a barn door, the cast iron in your kitchen, and the bolt heads on a wood stove, with leftovers for the rifle. Compare that to the $40 aerosol that lasts you one season on a mower deck. I'm not asking you to take my word. I'm asking you to do the arithmetic at your own kitchen table. The math is the point. The math is the whole quiet rebellion. You've probably noticed something if you've lived in the same county long enough. There was a generation of men who never owned a single can of rust spray, never bought one, wouldn't have known the aisle. And their tools, the ones their grandsons are using right now, sometimes without even knowing it, those tools are dark, dry, sound, and turning soil in the year of our Lord 2026. That isn't an accident. It isn't luck. It's a habit that took 15 minutes a year and almost nothing out of a billfold. Somebody decided that habit was inconvenient. Not to you, to them. I'll tell you who they are before we're done too. It isn't a man in a suit in a tall building, and I'm not going to pretend it is. It's something quieter and harder to fight, which is part of why it's worked so well. But we'll come to that at the end, where it belongs. Right now, I want you holding the right picture in your head. Pick the one thing in your house, your shed, your truck, the one rusted thing that bothers you most. The hand-me-down, the wedding gift skillet, the hinges on the door your wife asked you to fix in April. Hold that thing in your mind. Don't let it go. By the time we're done talking tonight, you're going to know exactly what to put on it, exactly how to put it on, exactly how long to let it sit, and exactly what the orange dust was hiding from you the whole time. You're going to know why the can in your shop cabinet has been quietly lying to your face for the last 20 years, and you're going to know the one safety rule that has burned barns to the ground when men skipped it. That's where we're headed. But first, I want to show you what rust actually is. Because once you see it plain, you can't be sold about it ever again. Rust is three things meeting, that's all: iron, oxygen, water. Put any two of them in a room together, and nothing happens. Put all three in the same place, and they start a slow fire that doesn't give off heat. That's what the orange dust on your hinge actually is. Iron that has caught a cold, slow flame from the air itself. The chemists have a longer word for it. The blacksmiths had a shorter one. Either way, the cure is not a mystery and never was. You break the meeting. You keep one of the three away from the other two. That's the whole science. A child could hold it in one hand. Now look at what the bright cans on the shelf are actually selling you. Most of them are a colored film. They go on wet, they dry hard, they look like a fix. And for one season, sometimes two, they are a fix. But a film is a renter, not an owner. It sits on top of the steel the way a tarp sits on top of a woodpile. The first hot day, it expands. The first cold night, it shrinks. Somewhere along that seam, it lifts. Water finds the lift. And underneath the pretty paint, in the dark where you can't see, the same three ingredients start their quiet meeting all over again. You repaint, they reset the clock, you repaint again. I want you to picture the porch railing you've redone 3 times. Same railing, same brush, same can, more or less. The third coat went on over the second coat, which went on over the first coat, and somewhere under all three, the original iron is still having the same conversation with the same wet air it had when Reagan was president. That isn't your fault. You did the work, you followed the directions on the back of the can. The directions just weren't written to end the problem. They were written to end this year's problem. Next year's problem is what keeps the aisle lit. Here is the part I want you to chew on slowly, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. A product that worked once and lasted 40 years would not survive a single meeting in a tall building. Nobody at that table gets a raise for selling a man 1 can in his lifetime. They get raises for selling him 1 can every spring. So the chemistry gets tuned year over year, decade over decade, not toward what works longest, but toward what works just long enough. I'm not telling you there's a villain with a mustache. I'm telling you the shape of the river bends the water. The water doesn't have to mean to bend. There was a man who maintained the equipment at a small dairy a couple of counties over from where I grew up. I won't give you his name because his grandchildren are still around and it isn't mine to give. He kept a coffee can on the windowsill of the milk house, half full of something dark, with an old rag folded across the top. Every Saturday afternoon after the last chore, he wiped down the hand tools, the latches, the chain on the gate, the blade of the corn knife. 15 minutes, maybe 20. That coffee can outlasted him. The tools outlasted him. The dairy didn't, but that's another story for another evening. He never bought a can of rust spray in his life. Not one. And if you'd asked him why, he wouldn't have made a speech about it. He would have shrugged and said something short. Men of that generation didn't argue with the hardware store. They just didn't go in. The thing in his coffee can wasn't a coating. That's the piece I want you to hold on to. It was a barrier that bonded. It went into the steel, not onto it. It filled the small places where water likes to hide. It left the tool looking almost bare, and that was the point. Bare to the eye. Sealed where it counts. If a thing sits on metal, weather will eventually pry it off. If a thing becomes part of the metal, weather has nothing to pry. That single sentence is what the rust aisle does not want you to carry out the door with you. Because once you understand it, the bright cans look like what they are: costumes. Paint pretending to be protection. A film pretending to be a bond. There are honest products on those shelves here and there, I'll grant that. But the category, as a category, is built to be repurchased. The old way was built to be applied and forgotten until next year's chore list came around. I keep a written list for folks who write in and ask of the 7 oldest barn-tested ways men used to keep iron sound. 1 for tools, 1 for cookware, 1 for chain, 1 for firearms, and so on. It'll be down below this video for anyone who wants the full kit later. But you don't need the list to start. You need 1 item, 1 rag, 1 afternoon, and a hinge you're tired of looking at. Which brings us, finally, to the $3, and to the small brown can that has been sitting in the same spot in the same aisle since your father was a young man, waiting for somebody to remember it. The can says boiled linseed oil on the front, $2 to $4 at any hardware store in the country, and it has been there in roughly that same brown can since long before you or I were born. Woodworkers know it. Old gunsmiths know it. Blacksmiths kept a jar of it by the forge for the last cooling pass on a finished piece. It is pressed from flaxseed, the same plant that gives us linen, and when you wipe a thin coat onto bare iron, something quietly remarkable happens. The oil seeps into the grain of the metal, then over hours it begins to harden, not dry, harden, into a thin, flexible, almost invisible skin that is bonded to the steel itself. That hardening is the whole trick, and it's worth understanding before you put a drop on anything you care about. Linseed oil doesn't evaporate the way water does. It cures, it pulls oxygen out of the air and locks it into a new structure, the way a scab forms over a cut. The film it leaves behind is not paint. It is part of the surface. Water cannot get under it because there is no under. Air cannot reach the iron because the oxygen the iron wanted is already spoken for. The reaction that makes rust has nothing left to feed on. You haven't covered the metal. You've quietly starved the fire. Here's how you do it, standing at your own bench on a Saturday with the radio low. Take the tool, knock the loose rust off with a wire brush or a piece of fine sandpaper, or a balled up square of steel wool if that's what's in the drawer. You don't need it shop new. You need it dry and you need it loose free. Wipe it down with a clean rag. If the sun is out, lay the tool on the driveway for 10 minutes and let it warm. Warm metal drinks the oil better than cold metal does. That one small step is worth more than half the products on the shelf. Pour a small puddle of the oil onto a fresh rag, not the tool, the rag. A puddle the size of a quarter is plenty for a shovel head. Wipe it on in long, even strokes the way you'd oil a baseball glove. Don't be generous, be thin, cover everything, then go back over it with the dry side of a second rag and wipe off every drop of excess you can find. The coat you want is the coat you almost can't see. Let the tool sit somewhere, out of the weather, on a board or a sawhorse, overnight. By morning, the surface will feel dry to the back of your hand. By the second morning, it will be set. Now hear me on the next part, because this is where men have lost barns. Linseed oil rags can catch fire by themselves. No spark, no match. The same slow reaction that hardens the oil on your tool gives off heat, and a rag balled up in a trash can holds that heat in until it lights. It's called spontaneous combustion, and your county fire marshal will tell you it happens every single year to somebody who didn't know. So when you're done, every time, no exceptions, lay the rags out flat on bare concrete or hang them over a fence wire until they're stiff. Or drop them in a coffee can of water with a lid. Don't ball them up, don't toss them in the shop bin, flat or wet or burned in the fire pit. That's the rule. Do that, and one small can will carry you further than you'll believe. A set of garden tools, the hinges on the barn door, the cast iron on the stove, the latches on the gate, the bolts you can reach on the wood stove, the trailer hitch, the corn knife if you still own one. You'll have oil left over for next spring. Compare that to $40 of aerosol that gave you one mower season, and the arithmetic stops being a debate. Recoat the hard-use tools once a year around the time you put the garden to bed. The hinges and the indoor iron every 2 or 3. That, in plain language, is what forever honestly means. So who are they, the ones who never taught you this? Not a person. Not a company I'd name from a barnside pulpit. It's a pattern, and the pattern is older and quieter than any villain. Somewhere over the last 70 years, 1,000 small skills that used to pass from a father's hand to a son's shoulder got replaced by 1,000 small purchases off a lighted shelf. Nobody decided that in one room. The market just paid better for the second arrangement than the first, and a generation of boys grew up watching commercials instead of watching their grandfather oil a hinge. The knowledge didn't get hidden. It got outbid, which means it isn't lost. It's just sitting on a shelf in a brown key waiting. You now know what to do with it. Go pick up the thing you pictured at the start of this. The hinge, the shovel, the skillet, the bolt heads, the hand-me-down nobody else wanted. Tell me in the comments which one you're starting with. Just the name of the tool. That's all I'm asking. And if you're the kind of soul who'd rather mend a thing once than feed an aisle every spring, the bell takes care of itself. You already belong to this porch. Next time we sit down, I'll show you the half cup of something most folks pour straight down the kitchen drain that will keep a cast iron skillet black, slick, and sound for the next 40 years. Bring the skillet. The orange dust on your hinge was never a fate. Tonight, it became a choice.